They never told you the truth about power. They taught you to speak politely, to compliment generously, to never upset or disrupt. They whispered that being good would be enough, that if you were kind, respectful, nice, women would naturally choose you. And yet every time you followed that script, you became invisible. Ignored not because you lacked value, but because you didn't understand the code. Because in every interaction, especially with a woman, there's an invisible negotiation of hierarchy. Most men enter that space seeking approval. They hand away their psychological leverage the moment they start chasing the right thing to say. But the man who turns every word into a strategic weapon, who installs his presence like a silent algorithm into her mind, doesn't begin by chasing validation. He begins by mastering perception. When you enter a conversation with need, you've already surrendered, not because she knows your thoughts, but because her subconscious reads every flicker in your eyes, every drop in vocal tone, every microsecond of hesitation. It isn't your outfit, it isn't your bank account, it's the tremor in your frame, that moment when you broke eye contact, when your voice softened with hope instead of command, when your energy said, "Please accept me," instead of, "I accept myself." And this is where most fail, because they operate from logic. But attraction is not logic. It's biological tension, a subconscious duel, and it is ruled not by who speaks louder, but by who owns the silence. There's a reason the quietest man in the room often gets the most attention. It's not charisma. It's not mystery. It's a strategic absence of need. A calm that forces others to adjust their rhythm to his. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. In his hidden writings, he reveals that the one who seeks to be loved by all will be betrayed by most. Why? Because approval-seeking is weakness in disguise. And weakness never inspires devotion. Women don't remember the men who said the perfect lines. They remember the ones who stirred emotional chaos, the ones who left them unsure, wondering, off balance. You do not create desire with flowers or polished compliments. You spark it by disrupting her patterns, by being the one man who doesn't fit into her expectations, the one who doesn't laugh too quickly or respond too easily. You speak less, but every word lands like a shift in gravity. You pause deliberately. You let silence bloom between sentences because silence, when owned, breeds intrigue. Predictability kills attraction. The man who reacts the same way every time, who always answers questions the right way, gets stored in the female mind as safe. And safe is forgettable. To fracture that mold, introduce unpredictability. Change the rhythm. Say less than expected. Refuse to explain every statement. Let your gaze carry a question she can't answer. It is not arrogance. It's the mark of a man who understands that seduction happens when her mind starts filling in the blanks. The moment you try to impress, you lose. The moment you need her reaction to feel secure, your frame collapses. And women feel this, not consciously but instinctively. It's not a thought, it's a feeling. And it happens in milliseconds. You believe you're having a casual conversation, but beneath the surface, her subconscious is scanning for structure, testing your emotional stability, measuring your frame. Because in every conversation, there is a silent battle for control. Machiavelli called it the theater of power. And in modern interaction, your strength is not your words. It's the reality you carry within that pulls her world into yours. You don't prove it, you imply it, through your pauses, through your grounded posture, through your refusal to justify who you are. Most men collapse at the first test. A sarcastic joke, a playful accusation, a moment of silence. They scramble to repair, to explain, to soften their stance. And with each reaction, they lose structure. Your job is not to pass her tests. It's to render them irrelevant. When she says something provocative, you don't counter it. You redirect it. Yes, but only the parts that work, you say with a smirk. No defense, no justification, just presence. And that presence is what her subconscious begins to orbit. There is a fortress being built in her mind. Every time you stay centered, you add another stone. Every time you don't flinch, you raise another wall. And the result is a man who doesn't ask for space, but becomes the gravity within it. This is not about manipulation. It's about refusing to negotiate your worth. You don't react to every tease. You don't chase every compliment. You listen more than you speak. You offer glimpses instead of full explanations. And she feels the weight of your mystery pressing against her curiosity. Try this. The next time you speak to a woman, count how many times you react. And then shift the frame. Ask questions that reveal more about her psychology than her preferences. What do you like in a man? Becomes, do you want to be desired or understood? That single question flips the axis. Now you're not seeking her approval. She's seeking yours. You're not part of the competition. You've become the one they're compared to. Power isn't declared. It's installed. And once installed, everything else adapts around it. A woman is not drawn to what you say. She is pulled toward the emotional altitude from which you say it. Confidence isn't in your tone. It's in your detachment from needing a reaction. The second you begin responding instead of leading, you've surrendered the throne. The frame has shifted, and you've stepped into her world instead of pulling her into yours. The man who dominates conversation doesn't raise his voice. He lowers his need. He withholds more than he reveals. He redirects more than he defends. And he understands that the real war isn't in the words exchanged. It's in the energy behind them. She says, "You're one of those guys who read manipulation books, aren't you?" You smile. "Only the ones that work?" Then you change the subject. Not because you're evading, but because she hasn't earned that explanation. And suddenly, she's wondering what else you know that you haven't said. Because obsession doesn't come from understanding. It comes from unfulfilled intrigue. You don't become unforgettable by being logical. You become unforgettable by being unresolvable. An open loop, a chapter that never closes. A question she can't stop trying to answer. She wants to feel your gravity before she knows your story. She doesn't want the biography. She wants the blueprint. The unshakable rhythm in your voice that tells her, "This man is not seeking a place in my world. He is inviting me into his." That is where the frame shifts. From needing to be chosen to being the one who chooses. Not in arrogance, but in inner certainty. That kind of man doesn't flinch when the conversation becomes unpredictable. He doesn't overreact when sarcasm appears or when silence stretches longer than expected. He doesn't chase the laugh, the nod, the yes. Because he knows the most powerful answers are felt, not spoken. You don't compete with other men. You're not trying to rise above them. You make them irrelevant by existing in a category of your own. And that category isn't built on wealth or looks or achievements. It's built on the singular experience of emotional paradox. You can be calm and wild, present and distant, warm and untamed. That contrast is unforgettable, because she cannot place you, and what cannot be placed becomes obsession. The mind loops around what it cannot categorize, and your power grows in the unresolved space between who you appear to be and what she senses you could be. That's when attraction crosses the threshold into fixation. And the truth is, fixation isn't triggered by perfection. It's ignited by emotional tension, by being just close enough to feel but far enough to reach. You don't explain your whole world. You offer fragments. Something happened in Madrid, but that's a long story. Then you move on. You don't explain the past, you leave threads, and her subconscious starts weaving, because the brain craves closure, and the man who never finishes his story stays alive in her mind long after he's gone. Women remember how you made them feel in your absence more than in your presence. That's why a strategic withdrawal is sometimes more powerful than a perfectly executed conversation. You don't disappear to manipulate. You disappear to preserve value. You say, "I think we're not in sync today." Then walk away with calm finality. Not cold, certain. Because your time is not currency, it's gold, and you choose where to invest it. That decision alone makes you rare, and what's rare becomes precious. Now she tests again. She says, "Prove you're not like the rest." You smile. "And have you proven you're worth the risk?" Frame shifted. She says, "You're arrogant." You say, "Only in front of someone who can handle it." That balance of firmness and play, challenge and warmth, it's not a gimmick. It's masculinity in strategic form. Masculinity that does not apologize for its presence, that does not dilute its intensity, that does not need to win because it already governs the tempo. And when the conversation begins to drift toward validation, when you feel her slipping into the power position, you do not resist. You pivot, elegantly. She asks, "So what do you do exactly?" You answer, "Depends on the day. Sometimes I conquer empires. Other times, I have brunch." That is not nonsense. That is a reframing of logic into mystery. She laughs, but her mind lingers, because the man who doesn't need to define himself creates space for her imagination to roam. And imagination is where obsession is born. Every fiber of your being must now align. Your gaze, steady, observant, unreadable. Your voice, controlled, not robotic, but deliberate. Your posture, open, not aggressive. And your energy, rooted, unmoved. A presence that makes others question their own. Because the goal is not to entertain. It is to imprint, not to be liked, to be felt deeply. And felt even more intensely when absent. You speak calmly, then drop a sharp line. "Didn't take you for someone who likes predictable things." Then silence. No explanation. The disruption isn't rude, it's calibrated. It causes a flicker in her self-image. And in that flicker, you plant the seed of unpredictability. Machiavelli understood this in diplomacy. Deliver an uncomfortable truth with the softness of an ambiguous compliment. The other party walks away wondering whether they've been insulted or praised, and they think about you for days. You do the same, but not in politics. In the psychological theater of desire. Do not validate everything. That's noise. Do not ignore everything. That's dismissal. You validate with precision. "Not bad," you say after something impressive. Then silence. You do not over-celebrate, you calibrate. And that calibration shows a man who is not bought by reactions, who listens without leaning forward, who observes without craving to be observed in return. And that, to her instinct, is irresistible. Another tactic. Redirection. She asks a controlling question. You don't answer it. You give her a story instead. "Why don't you have a girlfriend?" You smile. "Let's just say I'm more selective than most." It's not evasion. It's direction. You didn't lie. You didn't shut her down. You just changed the altitude of the conversation. And when you elevate the altitude, she has to rise to meet you. That is leadership without declaration. That is dominance without force. The final level is the emotional cliffhanger. Not in words, but in presence. You say, "I almost lost everything once over a decision that seemed right." Then silence. Her mind wants to know. Her heart leans in. But you've already moved on. The story stays unfinished, and so does her closure. The door remains half open, and the longer it stays that way, the louder her mind knocks. You've become not a person, but a story loop. You don't flood her with attention. You reveal yourself like a rare book. Slowly, one chapter at a time. A man not to be figured out, but to be experienced. And experience doesn't explain itself. It unfolds. You say little, she shares more. She invests. And every time she shares, her mind justifies the connection. Because what we invest in, we protect. And the man who makes her invest emotionally, slowly, without pressure, is the man whose absence becomes a question mark etched in her nerves. Let her imagine. Do not over-explain. Do not clarify your past. Let her fill the gaps, because in filling those gaps, she will project her deepest desires onto you. And what she projects becomes more real than anything you could ever say. That's how obsession is built. Not from truth, but from space. Not from access, but from scarcity. Not from being understood, but from remaining undefined. You become the unresolved energy in her system, the quiet echo in her nervous system. Not the man she remembers, but the one she cannot stop remembering. Because you didn't just speak, you structured the entire conversation like a silent battlefield, and you never lost your sword. While others tried to impress, you carved your essence into her frame of reality. That is not attraction. That is psychological imprinting, and it's more permanent than attention. She tests again. This time it's sharper. A subtle jab. A challenge disguised as curiosity. Do you always talk this confidently? Most men tense up, defend, over-explain. But you smile. No, not always. Sometimes I'm even worse. And that, right there, is an invisible counterattack. No justification, no defense. Just playful dominance. You've taken the test and turned it into a dance. You're not resisting her challenge. You're reframing it. That, brother, is verbal alchemy. She throws another one. You think all women are the same, don't you? The wrong answer tries to be respectful. No, I respect all women. The strategic answer is softer and deadlier. No, but some are so synchronized it feels like a union. Now she's not just listening. She's searching. Searching for where this unexpected thought came from. Because the goal was never to win the argument. It was to shift her internal dialogue from logic to fascination. Machiavelli understood this principle in statecraft. Never engage in open war. Engage in psychological leverage. You do the same. You don't fight her tests. You don't flinch under them. You redirect their energy into deep attention. And when the moment is right, you deploy the most elegant weapon of all, the calculated non-response. She says something to provoke you. You smile. Say nothing. Shift the topic. Not coldly, but with a poise that whispers, I could respond, but I choose not to. Nah, you're not denying her engagement. You're setting terms for it. And those terms are not spoken. They are felt. She feels it when your gaze doesn't waver. She feels it when your breathing stays slow. She feels it when you're not trying to control her, but simply refuse to be controlled. That's the quiet signal of true strength. The biological radar in her doesn't seek kindness or credentials. It seeks gravity, stability, power that is unmoved by chaos. And chaos, brother, is where most men are exposed. She changes her mood. She contradicts herself. She goes cold. She withdraws. And they panic. They try to repair, to re-engage, to prove they're different. You don't. You stand. You listen. You let her storm pass. Not because you're indifferent, but because your center does not depend on hers. That's not stoicism. That's strategy. She does not want to be dominated. She wants to feel safe surrendering. and a man who flinches at emotion cannot be trusted with her storm. She pushes again. You're just like the rest. You look at her, calmly. Then you'll be surprised when you meet me. No defense, no persuasion, just presence. You've turned the test into a declaration, and in that quiet resistance, her subconscious registers the difference. Not because you explained it, but because you lived it in that moment. Here lies a Machiavellian secret. The man who seeks to be the best loses to the man who becomes the hardest to replace. Perfection is forgettable. Emotional rarity is not. You can be imperfect, flawed, even strange. But if the emotional experience you provide is unreplicable, she will never fully let go. And that experience isn't created by strategy alone. It is created by paradox. You are firm but gentle, mysterious but sincere. You lead but remain open. That blend cannot be mimicked. It is felt in her nervous system, not processed in her mind. Machiavelli wrote that a great leader is not the one who is always right, but the one who is never predictable. She wants stability in essence, but unpredictability in form. Because the female brain craves leadership, protection, and emotional challenge. That triad is the biological foundation of deep attraction, and you supply it not by performing, but by embodying. You speak in calm tones, then drop a sharp line. You show warmth, then reclaim your stillness. You swing between contrasts she cannot resolve, and what cannot be resolved becomes unforgettable. A mini crisis in her self-perception, followed by your silence. You didn't insult, you disrupted. And in that disruption, you rise in psychological rank. The men she forgets were clear, obvious, categorized. You are not. You are a living question. This brings us to the fifth weapon, selective attention. Total validation is boring. Total detachment is rejection. But selective calibration, praising only what earns it, ignoring what seeks it, that is addictive. She says something clever. You say, "Not bad." Then silence. She doesn't just hear the words, she feels the weight of your attention, because it's rare, because it's earned, because it cannot be bought. Sixth weapon, elegant diversion. She asks, "What do you do for a living?" You could say consulting or tech, like every other man. Or you could say, "Depends. Some days I lead revolutions, other days I take naps." That isn't dodging. That is mystique. It invites her imagination to fill the gaps. And what she imagines, she remembers. Seventh weapon, the strategic gaze. You don't stare. You don't scan. You observe. You hold one extra beat of eye contact after her response. You nod not for approval, but for punctuation. That stillness in your eyes, that quiet evaluation, it tells her, "I see more than what you say." And in that moment, you are not just a man. You are a mirror, and mirrors reveal what words cannot. This is how you win the conversation without ever trying to win. You become an experience, not a memory. She walks away unsure of what just happened, unsure of what she felt, but certain that she felt something. And that certainty grows louder in your absence, because you didn't finish the story. You didn't give her closure. You left a thread hanging, and now her subconscious keeps pulling at it, days later, weeks later, in silence. The average man ends every story. You don't. You become the unfinished script that keeps looping. And here lies the final truth. The male mind wants to be understood. The masculine weakness is to explain, but the masculine strength is to be imagined. Let her project. Let her build her version of you. She will hold on tighter to her creation than to your reality. And that projection becomes obsession, because you are no longer a man in her memory. You are a presence in her psyche, a silhouette that cannot be replaced. You didn't try to convince. You created space. You didn't react. You absorbed. You didn't chase. You directed. And in that direction, you led her not with pressure, but with gravity. If you've listened this far, you already know you are not like the others. You're not here to repeat old scripts. You're not here to be a good guy. You're here to build something deeper, a presence that alters energy, that commands attention, that earns respect without seeking it, and that turns silence into a weapon more powerful than any pickup line. Machiavelli said, "He who conquers himself dominates all without raising a hand." And now, brother, you've been handed not just tactics, but transformation. This is no longer about women. This is about how you carry yourself into every room, into every decision, into every moment of tension. The question now is not, do you understand it? The question is, will you apply it? Because if you do, you will become more than a man. You will become an emotional architecture others orbit. And when you speak, it won't be words. It will be law. Not because you demand it, but because you are it. That is the Machiavellian code. Silent, lethal, irresistible. And now it's yours. Use it wisely, and never speak of it. Let them feel it. Let them wonder. Let them remember you, long after you've gone.